listening to The Motherhood Experience, a podcast where you are a part of the conversation with moms, for moms, and by moms. Let's jump into this episode with me, your host, Val Kleppen. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Motherhood Experience podcast. This has been the greatest thrill for me. I am so glad I started doing this. I hope it's fun for you because I am having a blast. That said, tonight, I had the privilege of interviewing one of my coworkers. I have not known her long at all, less than a year. And I had a plan in my head when the podcast started of interviewing kind of in somewhat of a chronological order, or at least, maybe from closer to the beginning to closer to present day across some sort of timeline that I made up in my head. But I had a feeling that Elisha would be such a good guest and that her story would resonate and or inspire my listening base. And I wanted to have her on. Thankfully, she agreed. I don't know why. I don't know why people are like, sure, Val, I'll talk to you on a recording. But you know what? I love it. I'm not going to question it. We're going to keep rolling. So tune in now to my interview with Elisha Ford in episode 4 of the Motherhood Experience podcast. So Elisha, thank you so much for joining me for the Motherhood Experience podcast. Admittedly, the guests that I've had to date and that I have on the schedule going forward, I've known for years, decade plus.
Yeah.
I have known you since January.
Yeah. Just a short little bit.
But I'm thrilled. And I knew when I started this podcast, you would make a good guest. I don't know why I knew that because, like I said, I don't know much about your motherhood journey, but I'm excited to find out about it tonight.
Well, thank you so
First,
much for having me.
yes. First question is and I'm going to ask you if you will share the names of your children because that will lead into the next question that I have for you. But names and ages of your children so our listeners know what stage of parenting you're in.
Yeah. So my oldest is Lucy, and she is 9. And then Afton is 6. Sebastian is 4. And Peregrine, we call Pip, is 2. And I like to say that I am in the stage where we don't sleep because my 9-year-old wants to stay up until 11, and my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old don't sleep through the night, and my 2-year-old has to be up early in the morning. So,
And yet here you sit with a smile.
yeah.
Ready is you just smile and bear it.
Yep.
Smile and
Oh,
bear it.
yes. Yeah.
So tell me, your children's names are not the most common names. It's not that no one has those names, but they're not the most common. I would love to know how you and your husband Ty decided on names for your kids.
With Lucy, when I was pregnant with her, we had a boy's name picked out and were sold. Like before we even knew I was pregnant, had kind of had a conversation about names and agreed. Boy's name. Loved it, knew what we were going to name our son if we someday had a son. And then we found out we were having a girl and could not agree at all. And I really loved the name Lucy. I love Lucy Pevensey from the Chronicles of Narnia, and my husband was not sold. So I said, we should read the Chronicles of Narnia out loud together and to the baby. We'll read to the baby. And after we read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he fell in love with the name Lucy. And so that was how we came up with her name. And then when I was pregnant with Afton, we also had a boy's name picked out, a different boy's name than the first boy's name. And we were like, absolutely, if we have a boy, this is the name, 100%. So, of course, we had a girl. And we couldn't agree again at all on names. And he wanted to do something similar with Afton's name, as like, this name is related to something that is meaningful to us. So, reading the Chronicles of Narnia was very meaningful to us. So there was a song by Nickel Creek, which is based off of a poem called Sweet Afton. And that name, which he thought was Ashton for the longest time, we looked up the lyrics and said, okay, Afton it is. And I actually was not sold on her name, but fell in love with it at some point along the way in the pregnancy. And before I was pregnant with Afton, we actually had a miscarriage and we decided to name that baby River. And I got pregnant almost immediately. Like we had tried for a year before that pregnancy and then got pregnant. So I was like, oh man, I will never, it's going to be so long before I get pregnant again. And was pregnant immediately after. And so when we picked out Afton's name and fell in love with it, realized that this poem is about a river. And so we had Baby River and Baby Afton. And I think there is something pretty meaningful that way
I
of like,
love that
yeah, it's just a very special connection to those two names. So
for sure.
yeah.
I love that.
Um, and then Sebastian, so we had a name for a girl picked out this time. We were like, we know. So then we realized we were going to have a boy. That we knew pretty early on. It's like we're having a boy. We can't agree on boys' names now. And we had picked out a name, and you can edit this out if you need to, but we liked the name Bast, which is a character from a book. However, if you say Bast and Ford quick enough together, it is not a great name. And it took us way too long to realize that. So we were like both very sold on this name and realized that wasn't going to work out. So tried to think of names again and then realized, oh, we could go with Sebastian. We like the name Bash. So that one is how he got his name. Peregrine, and I was the one who had picked out actually Sebastian's name. So it was, I picked out Lucy's name, I picked out Afton's name, I picked out Sebastian's name. And then when I was pregnant with Peregrine, we knew we didn't want to have any more kids after baby number 4. We had both been very much so we like would love to have 4 kids. So then it was this is our last baby. And we also still had a girl's name picked out. So we knew we were like, okay, we're having a boy again. And his name, there wasn't necessarily like a meaningful character, his or part from something, like his middle name is, I guess, from a character, sort of. Everyone just really liked this character. His middle name is Basil, or Basil, depending on which person in our family is saying it. And with Peregrine, my husband really wanted to do another nature themed name like Afton. And I do like The Hobbit, and there is a Peregrine. His name is Pip, or Pippin. And I liked the nickname Pip. So that was kind of how we settled on this, nature themed name for him that my husband really liked. And I liked the nickname Pip. So that was how we came up with his name.
I love those stories. And I also love how the names of your children with the nature theme, and even Lucy's with the Narnia series, and how they enter a different realm through the wardrobe. You guys recently went on a journey where you moved from suburban life to like really out in the country life. What has that been like for your kids? Is this a whole new world for them? Do they feel like they always should have been here?
So our first house, so we lived in a 600 square foot house, so teeny tiny little house, all 6 of us, and the backyard was what had really sold my husband and I on our house. So this teeny tiny little house we were in, and it had a huge garden. We had a 500 square foot garden, which is like
Almost
bigger,
as big
almost
as
as
the house.
yes, yeah. And then just this beautiful backyard, beautiful front yard, huge trees. We had a 20-foot swing, like from one of the tree branches. And my kids, they loved being outside. We loved being in the garden. We had chickens and just spent a lot of time soaking up that house and being outside. And it was a very magical place for all of us to live in.
Hmm.
But also, there were 6 of us in a little over 600 square feet when you consider the attic. And I realized like it was not, we couldn't continue. I know lots of people have made it work in the past, but it was one of those North Dakota winters are brutal and there's too much time that we're not outside and it wasn't going to be okay. I wasn't going to be okay
Right.
continuing on in this house. So we actually moved a little over a year ago to this very beautiful, very like everything is updated, everything is taken care of, no projects, no nothing. Not a huge yard, but like great neighborhood, super walkable, parks all around, amazing. Like the river is just, you go down the block and over the dike and you're at the river. And living in that house, my oldest actually summed it up. She said, this house, like our old house had magic. This house doesn't have magic.
Oh,
And so
wow.
this house, she also referred to it as our transition house. And so like it was this place where she knew we knew this wasn't our forever home, but it was like right now, this is what we need. And my husband and I realized, which is funny, I think if I reminded him of this today, he would maybe say that he was crazy. But we realized we wanted a project house. We wanted a house that had character, but that we got to do the projects and we wanted the space outside. And through a series of events, found this house that is, I mean, it is a project house. Everything that could go wrong and could break has broken and has gone wrong. And so, but when we brought our kids out here for the first time to check it out after we had come here and really liked the house a lot, Lucy looked at me and said, Mom, this house has the same kind of magic as our first house. And
Oh,
so I think from day one, we walked in and we knew this is it. This is the house and the place for us. And it has been very crazy because there are a billion projects. And because my husband somehow has convinced me every month to get more animals. And so we have over 80 animals. We have lived here for like we've actually been here just over 2 months and we have over 80 animals. I don't know how he convinced me of that. But yeah, they have just loved it. And Sebastian, when he was really young, we'd always refer to him as the chicken wrangler. He could always catch it, like 2-year-old Sebastian, catch a chicken, carrying it around. Like he loved the chickens, they loved him. And it's just really clear they've all been really loving being out here and soaking up the animals and the space. And it's been chaotic, but it feels very peaceful too in the midst
yeah.
of that chaos.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really good.
I love that so much. And I think that's part of what, so for the listeners, Elisha and I actually work together. We work for the same company. And she started in January. And I heard all of these country living, homesteading plans. And I was like, she is my people. And so I'm just so thrilled to hear that. And Lucy sounds like such an old soul
She is. She really is.
with that perception of, magic and saying a transition house. And oh my goodness, she's my people
She
too. I want to be friends
she's
with Lucy.
yes, she's one of those kids that I my kids, their personalities are all so different. I mean, so vastly different. But Lucy is one of those kids that when I spend time, just her and those little things come out that she's thinking and pondering over, it causes me to stop and think. And I feel like she's just so deep, and
Mm,
she doesn't realize how deep she is with the things that she is thinking through. And I've really appreciated that about her
yeah.
where Afton is the kid who is her sense of humor. I don't even know how to explain it. She just makes everyone laugh in these very, it's not like little kid humor in the sense of, I don't know, kids making like fart jokes or whatever it is that like little
Right.
kids normally, she just has these really funny ways of doing and saying things that bring out the sense of humor that I wish, I am not, admittedly not a super playful person. It is very hard for me to be a playful person, and I'm very melancholy, and I'm okay with that. Yeah, Afton's ability to just bring out that sense of like funny humor, making us laugh, making us be silly in stressful situations. I've really appreciated that. Yeah.
So
So,
that actually, this is kind of a curious out of left field question then. You miscarried baby River between Lucy
mhm,
and Afton, and
yes.
how you're describing Afton, maybe to many may have those third born traits. And I don't know if you have read into birth order or anything like that, but birth order repeats after it repeats every three.
Hmm.
So like
Okay.
your fourth child typically has firstborn traits, and It
Okay.
can also vary on, girls versus boys and all of this, but I'm wondering if you have noticed in the four children that you have, if maybe that makes sense. Like, does Sebastian kind of act like maybe more of a firstborn than a thirdborn, or
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this. I don't know a ton about birth order, but we always say Afton is the baby of our family. She might be the second oldest, but she is the baby of our family. And there's this interesting thing that plays out when my kids are playing together, where Sebastian and Lucy do have this very similar energy. Lucy could read books all day and never move. Like she could just say, I will sit on a bed all day, I will read a book. You don't have to do anything with me, just ignore me. I'll
yeah,
be fine. Where Sebastian is like, I need to play ball. I like soccer.
move?
I
Yeah.
don't, yes, I don't know where he learned about soccer because we do not do sports, but he is out there. I am playing soccer and kicking a ball and running around. Like, okay, that's great. But they have this very similar energy and often gravitate towards each other. And we've noticed that with Afton and Pip too, where they both are very much so like, we are the babies and we're going to go be the babies together in this really fun way. And so, yeah, it is interesting to think about. And yeah, there's an Instagram person that I follow that does firstborn, middle child, and youngest,
Okay.
oftentimes very humorous account about like how
Yes.
they act. And sometimes the middle child ones really seem to hit with Acton.
Okay.
Um, but then other times I'm like the youngest child, like showing up and being like, I am the present. Obviously, like for Mother's Day,
Right.
I'm the present. Like that is 100% both Afton and Peregrine are that way, but Peregrine's also two. Where
Right.
yes, Sebastian is very he can be really thoughtful and considerate and responsible for a 4-year-old, which I'm always shocked by how responsible he can be sometimes. Or the other day, he just came in and said very kind words to me that felt like something a 4-year-old wouldn't be saying to their mom, like, oh, you're very good, mom. You're very beautiful. It's like, did your dad put you up to this? Or it's like, no, I just wanted you to know. Have a good day. Like, walked
Oh,
out.
bless. That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
Yeah.
So how did it play into you and Ty having children? You own a coffee shop, went
Yes.
into coffee shop ownership business. Was that before kids? And then how did kids change that?
We were in full-time ministry and moved up here. That's how we ended up in Fargo.
Okay.
And then Ty got 3 months of not months, 3 weeks of paternity leave after Lucy was born. And we had been kind of discussing Fargo. We knew we wanted to stay here. I don't know why. It was like terrible winter. It was so cold. And we also were like, this is home. We're
Sure.
staying here. Great. And so we we had that conversation. This is where we want to stay. The place that we're working for right now will move us if we are with them. So we can't continue on doing this. And it wasn't a good fit for us either, which is we loved the team that we worked with, but the work was not the right fit for us.
Hmm.
And so Ty had worked at a coffee roastery and had learned how to roast coffee in the past and had been a barista. So he said, "This is my one skill. This is what I can do." Fargo doesn't have anyone at that point in time who was roasting coffee in the area, and so he said, "Let's. I think we should do this." And we had had a lot of change. So we had gotten married, found out I was pregnant, moved across this like several states, and had his dad pass away and his grandpa pass away, all within 1 year of us being together. My parents also their divorce finalized, so we had known each other. We've been married a year, and we had only known each other 6 months longer than that. We got married very quickly. So I said, listen, that sounds great. Let's wait until after we have our baby, and then we can start talking about what that looks like for us to consider possibly maybe opening a coffee shop. And he said, okay. And he took that to heart. So the day that we got home from the hospital, my family was here. And then, like, the next day, his family was here. And then they left. And the next day, he started his business plan for the coffee shop that we own. And and that was, it was a really big learning curve because I think we hadn't known each other very long, so we were still learning how to communicate with each other. We had a young baby, who, is just had just come into the world. We had, yeah, now we're starting this new business. And so there was a lot of conflict, as you can imagine, and a lot of negotiating.
Wow.
And my big thing, we had gone to an entrepreneurial readiness workshop, which is, try saying that 5 times fast. Terrible
Right.
name. But we had gone to this workshop together, and this person that we had met with, and done some one-on-one coaching had said something about just how important it was for us to have a team. She's like, you don't start a business by yourself. Like,
Mm,
find your people that match your strengths. And we were having a lot of conflict because we like to refer to it like skeet shooting. I was throwing the clay pigeons up and I was shooting everything down. And so, that coming into our marriage where he can't then have me to process with was causing some conflict. And so I was having this issue that had stuck in my mind of like, we need partners. We can't do this alone.
mm.
And so we were roasting coffee out of our basement in our 600 square foot house, where he would unplug the dryer so he could hook it up to the vent and then plug it back in. And he somehow got asked to do coffee for a nonprofit in town, this local nonprofit. And he brewed giant Cambros of coffee by hand, pouring water in our little teeny tiny kitchen to this event. And while he was there, one of the people who worked there, she, like, for this nonprofit, her husband came up to Ty and said, I've always wanted to open a coffee shop. Let's talk. And so they sat down and talked, and it felt very much so like our marriage, in the sense of like Ty and I barely knew each other. Everything
Mm.
moved very quickly. Like, now we're committed. We're saying we're in this. And so he met this guy Mike once, twice. There were two events. Then Mike and him met up for coffee, and then they came over to our house one evening after we put Lucy to sleep, and we had a conversation about them entering a business partnership. And there we go. It's definitely one of those things that I can look back on and say, in this, God was really good.
Yeah.
The friendship that developed out of that, and Michael and I can relate to him a lot. Let's shoot down all of those ideas and do the thing that is cost effective and makes sense. And it's nice uh, to have Mike and Ty be the ones who work that out, and me have perspective of like, well, no, that makes sense, and also I understand you and I can support you. Um, so yeah, so we were still figuring out. Lucy wasn't even a year old when we opened the coffee shop, and yeah, so she was 10 months old. We actually have a picture of her. It's the five of us. So Lucy and then Mike and Danae and Ty and I pulling the first shot at like 10 p.m. Because of course at that stage it's like, oh yeah, why not have our 10-month-old
Wow.
out with us doing things. She was a very chill kid and very flexible, would fall asleep anywhere and wake up and be fine. So yeah, it was a big change. And
I had no idea about any of this, and my mind is just kind of blown. I knew that you and Ty moved really quickly from
mhm,
like meeting to marriage.
yeah.
I was just under the assumption, I guess, that you started this coffee shop, ran it for a while, and then, "Oh, hey, we should start a family." But that's not how it
No,
happened at all.
no. This is so the animals, having 80 animals, I'm like, this isn't surprising. Like, we do nothing by halves. If we're in it, we are all in it, um, and that's okay. Like, that's just maybe part of how both of us operate in some ways. I'm definitely the more cautious one,
Yeah.
but I can also go with it, and handle all of the change until I'm like, no, wait, we can't handle the change anymore. We need to change something differently.
Let's tap the brakes on
Yes,
change for a
yes,
minute, please.
yes, yep.
But so there is one story that I do know, and I would love for you to share because I think it is such a beautiful story of when you started working, you were offered the position with the
Mhm.
company that we work for, you started writing, you had been in writing before, you got this job, and it's kind of take it from there and walk me to how you were working and what you talked to Ty about.
Yeah, so I think it's right before we both were very unhappy. And a lot of it was some mental health things that I needed to work through.
Mm,
COVID really brought into light my OCD that and I had a baby during COVID. So you put those two things together and my anxiety went through the roof. And so I got into therapy and started treating my OCD and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so working through those two things and it just started to realize, we moved very fast in all of these things that we've been doing and just had a lot going on. And we were both really burning out and really tired, just emotionally and mentally and physically too. And so we knew we needed a change and we were trying to figure out what that was could be. And through a whole bunch of different circumstances, that the change ended up being me getting a job,
mm,
which had kind of seemed out of the question for a long time. We both were, I would say, like fundamentalist light. Like we weren't really fundamentalists, but we were borderline, and that is not where we are now anymore. And so yeah, so it was, I had this very strong belief I'm supposed to be staying home with my kids and Ty is supposed to be working and that pressure actually for him of like I'm supposed to be providing was really weighing on him
mm.
and I was not loving being a stay-at-home mom anymore, which I was also homeschooling and had a newborn basically, it's like we got to a 2-year old and then I had another newborn or didn't even make it to the 2-year old stage and had another
Yeah.
newborn. So it was just really burning out and not doing well. And so like bunch of circumstances that happened and I get this job and as I'm settling into writing and continuing to figure out kind of who I am and the things that I enjoy and having space to think, which I didn't realize I really, really did not have
Mm,
when with my kids, because it just wasn't possible with us both being so worn down and starting to work and feeling really satisfied and happy with my life. And I look at Ty one day and I'm just like, I am so happy. What do we need to do so you can be happy too, like as happy as I am? And he, of course, was like, well, let me tell you, there's a property I want us to go look at. And so that was how we actually ended up finding this house. And a lot of that had to do, he'd been researching for several years what it would look like to do market gardening, which is like CSAs or
yeah.
going
Yeah.
to farmers markets and selling your produce and wanting to do something more sustainable. My husband is a hippie, like just
Yes.
he's very much so like, how do we be good stewards of the earth? How do we
Yes.
care well for people around us and provide good quality food at affordable prices? Like, how do we do these things that are for him just very valuable? And so yeah, that was how we ended up making that switch here, so that way he can pursue that and I get to write and spend my days writing and also being interrupted every 5 minutes to be asked if like somebody can have a snack and then I always say like that's a question for your dad and they go
Yes.
and find him and yeah, just navigating that change of me being the one working and he we still own our coffee shop but he has the summer off and will only be going back part-time, so he is doing most of the childcare right now and navigating that difference of kind of figuring out what that looks like for us to step into each other's roles and grow in compassion and care and grace for the other person.
Yes.
So
I just love that so much how, you were head down in the thick of it, homeschooling for young children and able to come up and just kind of see, I have contentment and happiness now. I want the same for my husband. What does that look like for you? I just think that is such a beautiful story. And
mhm.
you did touch on what it is like to work from home with the kids now, which they've made guest appearances in some of our team meetings. They are
Yes.
adorable children. I would love to know how you, so living out in the country, working from home, all of these involvements in different areas. What does community look like for you? Where outside of your household do you find your people, as it were?
For the longest time, so much of our community was through the coffee shop. And I would still say we have a lot of relationships through the coffee shop, but now
Yeah,
that's half an hour away. So it does
yeah.
look very different. We have a lot of neighbors very close to us. So we actually just found out today that on the street that we live on, even though we have so much land, it's great. There's several houses right close to us, and there used to be a store and a post office and a depot and all of this. So this like little neighborhood that we're in is really close, and our neighbors stop by, they offer help and ask questions and have lots of opinions on the things that we are doing terribly, because there are lots of things we're doing terribly. And then also we're a part of two different homeschool groups. And so one Ty is a part of, and he takes our kids too. And then one meets every other Thursday. And so I take the girls to that one while the boys will be in daycare. And so that's been a big part of where we've found our community is through homeschool groups. But then also living in this small community, it has been really wonderful to have a lot of people stop by, especially there's a lot of older generations here. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one of our neighbors has lived here for 73 years. Like that's how long he has
Wow.
been in this neighborhood. And having older, wiser people who stop by and just offer kindness and less like we've learned a lot in the 2 months that we've lived here. So
Oh, I love that so much. So, one more question before we wrap up on time here. And again, my mind is just kind of spinning because I'm learning so much about you. And then, tomorrow we're just going to jump right back into work. I just want to know, do you feel like as a writer that you have to document, this is a random question, bear with, that you have to document things about your children's life in, you know, fantastical prose? Like when you write things down, or do you feel like you have to make it sound really good, or do you just jot things down? Does that make sense?
it does make sense. I am learning to let go of the so which it's one of those, I mean, everyone says this, right? Your first kid, they get the beautiful, what are those called? Like books of
The baby
their
books,
first,
yeah.
yeah, baby books. There we go.
Yeah.
So I used to write letters to Lucy, like regularly would write these long letters with thoughts that I have on her growing up or things that I'm experiencing and helping to share wisdom or, just different things like this.
Yes,
And that has
yes.
steadily trailed off. I think Pip has one or maybe two letters. Poor little sweet Pip. And one of the things I've had to let go of is and recognize is there's only so much time that I have in a day. And want to I want to keep track of these things. I want to
Mhm.
have those memories. And to do that, I need to prioritize just getting it, like snapping it and having something short and sweet about what is going on. And I think Instagram has actually helped me with that because I do a lot of documenting through Instagram. I love that they will tell you this happened a year ago on this day.
Yes,
Like I
yes.
love those reminders. And I'm like letting go of it being perfect and saying what I've put out is what I've put out and sharing that so I can compile things more easily and be able to like make chapbooks or things like that to share with my kids so that they are able to look back is more important. But it's been a big process of letting that go. So
I love that answer so much, not only as an honest, transparent answer, but just as encouraging advice as we wrap up this episode to other moms. You're going to have these ideas as you become a mother, and then even as each child comes into your life after that, things are going to look totally different from what you planned or anticipated. And holding it with an open hand rather than a closed hand, letting go of perfection and just embracing what it is and the ways that you can memorialize it
yeah,
as simply as possible, but still as meaningful as possible.
yeah, absolutely.
I love that so much. Well, Elisha, it has been a pleasure Thank you so much. I cannot believe, really. I kind of can because you trust me with work stuff, but I can't believe that I was just like, I started this thing. I would love for you to be a guest. Would you? And you were like, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. And I'm really excited for you and to see where the podcast is going to go.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Motherhood Experience podcast. To join our exclusive TME community, head on over to themotherhoodexperience.com/learn more. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment below, and we'll catch you next time.